welcome everyone. Super excited to have this opportunity with Bob and Bob. Thank you for making the time. I think one thing that will show through the entire webinar is your passion not only to teach this game, to execute on a high level, but to also share your knowledge, which really sets you apart in the coaching community. So thank you for your time that you're going to allot to us for this next hour. We know there's going to be a lot of questions. As I was saying earlier, there was near 1,000 signups for this webinar for the Scouting Masterclass. So what we'll do is actually use the Q&A section. You guys can put any question you want in there because we won't be able to get to questions on this webinar. Coach Starkey has graciously accepted that he'll sit down and answer those questions. So we'll try to get some videos of that out to you all and make sure all those questions do get answered you guys put in. So do not be shy. We'll try to ask some questions when they fit. We have a lot of topics to cover and we want to make sure we get to those items. So Austin, anything I'm missing there from the housekeeping side?
Nope. I think we're all good to go. So with that, we're going to be on here for about an hour today, everybody. We are going to keep it to a tight schedule. As Dee said, there are a ton of topics. We're going to start with Bob, your backstory, your career path, how that has kind of influenced you. Then we're going to roll into really digging into the championship game and some of your prep on that. But more importantly, I think the thing that we really want to get into is just how your scouting process has evolved over, your career. And there'll be some questions that we sprinkle in the mix, but I'd say let's go ahead and kick it off with Bob. Just, let's talk about your backstory. You've had such a great experience coaching in a variety of leagues and in a variety of levels. Just talk to us a little bit about how you've seen things change over the course of your career as far as scouting goes.
Well, I think the base of my scouting philosophy started my very first opportunity to work at Winfield High School. I was still in college at the time, and I went by to talk to my coaches there and ask them how I could help. And you're always looking for scouts. That was back in an era where scouting was in person. So some of those coaches would take me out with them and show me what they were looking for and how to watch a game and how to study a game and how to translate that information back to them. And so for the next several years, I spent a lot of time scouting for my high school team. And that was just a great learning experience for me. I was really young. And I really wanted to learn the game. And I've said this over and over, and it's still true today. I learn more about basketball scouting than any other singular thing that I do, whether it's reading a book or going to a clinic, or I just, if you watch the game the right way and you're asking yourself the right questions, it's a classroom. It's just a great way to learn the game. And so from there, I kind of started out my scouting philosophy and wanting to be the best that I could be and all that. And if I don't mind, I always tell this story when I speak. When I played junior high basketball in West Virginia, my junior high coach, Alan Osborne, was a Bob Knight protege. He'd learned the game from watching Coach Knight. I mean, we played man-to-man defense, motion offense. We even had the candy stripe warm-ups like the Hoosiers used to. And so then when I got into coaching, from time to time, we would travel to Bloomington on a weekend before the season would start. And we'd watch Indiana practice for 2 or 3 days. And when I watched those practices, they were amazing. First of all, you came out and Indiana had, like 9, 10 managers wearing red shorts and white T-shirts, had a towel over here, a ball under here. They were spaced perfectly. You had about 3 managers up in the bleachers that were taking stats. You had another manager that was filming. They would start practice with about 20 minutes of pre-practice, post players on one end, post players on the other end. Coach Knight would come out, whistle, take the team down in the locker room for a few minutes and go over the emphasis day. Then they would come out and be part method, whole method, part method, whole method. The scouting plan was incredible. And I just remember as a young coach thinking every young coach should have to come to Bloomington, Indiana to learn how to teach and coach the game. This one particular year, Indiana wasn't practicing, and on a Sunday, so on the way back, we stopped at Louisville to watch the legendary Denny Crum practice. And they literally went through 2-line layups, a couple of drills, and then they scrimmaged. They had one manager, and that manager was wearing blue jeans and had a heavy metal sweatshirt, was propped up on the scores table, keeping the clock. And literally a week later, Louisville went to Bloomington to open the season and beat Indiana by 11. So the most important lesson I've ever learned coaching was that there's a lot of different ways to do things. No mistake about it. Coach Crum certainly was a great coach. He won multiple national championships. Not all his practices were that laid back, but certainly they were different than Knights. Knights run in motion, man defense, not switching, no pressing. Louisville, UCLA high post op, and switching all screens, pressing. So as we go through this and I talk about the things that we do that have worked for us, I don't want anybody to think that this is the only way to do it. Because it's not. You have to find what works for you. And more importantly, if you're an assistant coach, you have to find what works for your head coach, because every head coach wants it differently. Knight was a big scout guy. They were big in the scout report and making adjustments. Denny Crum, not so much. Denny Crum had worked for John Wooden, who didn't do any scouting. So I think the best thing to do here is to be flexible. I hope my goal, anytime I go to a clinic, I have one goal, and that's to bring one piece of information back that either makes me better, my team better. If I get one piece of information, then that time was well spent. So hopefully we can do something here that maybe helps somebody just move the needle a little bit to improve themselves or improve their program. From high school, I went to the NAIA level where we did some in-person scouting and we'd watch a little video. My first opportunity on the BCS level was to work for Dale Brown at LSU, and in-person scouting was big. Matter of fact, while in-person scouting was you rarely saw video of me sitting on the bench with LSU, because I was going from place to place, game to game. There were no computers, so I'm writing out the scouting report on this little template report that I have, and then faxing it for young people who don't know what faxing is. So we fax that information back to the head coach, and every now and then I'd make it back home to where I could give the information. So then the obviously the video portion of scouting came into play, and we still get to do a little bit of in-person scouting. NCAA allows us to in-person scout at tournaments, but most of it is done by video now, and I think there's some good things and some bad things. I like being able to do both. I think you get things differently from both. What I've been blessed during my career is to work for different head coaches to find out different things that work for them, and I've been mentored by a lot of people, both in the NBA level and the college level. And so I feel very blessed at this point to have had a lot of people give me some input that it's made me a better scout and a better assistant coach.
I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, Bob, but I did want to share with the audience just this might say career pathway, but all the work that you have done thus far with over 30 years of experience in the SEC and doing it in a multitude of ways. And we're just eager to be able to help share that on our side. And I think that's why I love that quote you said about scouting. If you do it the right way, it truly is a classroom and it betters your mindset. And that's something that our listeners will be able to get throughout this entire webinar, especially when we get to that scouting process piece of it. And from here, just so everybody knows, we'll be covering the championship preparation for the game first. And before we get there, Bob, I wanted to ask you, you said it yourself when we were able to catch up. You had a shorter time span when you were preparing for a game like Iowa. How does your postseason scouting differ from in-season scouting in terms of preparation for you?
Well, obviously, it's the second game of a tournament weekend. You literally have 24 hours. And so we've obviously gotten to the national championship game with Iowa. We just went through a very tough physical game against a really good Virginia Tech team. So Coach Malky is real big on the mental aspect of preparation. We're going to make sure as much as possible we have fresh minds and fresh legs. So that morning, the day between Virginia Tech and Iowa, we watched some film, went over some of the points of emphasis, went to the arena, did just a little bit of shooting, and then literally walked through our game plan. and then watched a little bit more film the next night. And then, of course, the game day, we went and we had a walkthrough. So, during the regular season, you may have 2 or 3 days of full practices where you could really, really do some things. If you're into scouting and you want to attack certain things. So certainly it was just much, much more compact and relied a lot more on our mental focus and concentration and putting the game plan in.
Bob, that makes total sense. On a short turnaround, what are you looking for? Whether it's in the numbers, in the video, like what's the first thing that you try to figure out?
Well, the first thing, whether it's we got a short time or whether we got a long time, we're trying to figure out what the identity of our opponent is. And we think everybody has an identity. Are they a 3-point shooting team? Are they a dribble penetration team? Are they an offensive rebounding team? Are they a pressure defensive team? We're trying to find out that one thing that each team hangs their hat on. What is that one thing that makes them good, especially in the postseason? Now, that's not to say certainly, you play some teams that have 3 or 4 things that, the further you advance in the postseason, the more every team has good things working for them, but you still have to find the one thing you think is most important. If you're trying to take everything away from an opponent, you're not going to take anything away. So when we get in the postseason, we're really trying to really focus in on one thing on both ends of the floor. And we feel like if we could do that, then we have a chance to compete and win the basketball game. And we'll say this probably over and over in the next hour. In so many ways of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of scouting, less is more. And that is even more prevalent when you get in the postseason. Rick Majerus used to say that, the more you think, the slower your feet get. So we're not trying to bog them down with a lot of stuff. When we just got through playing a tough physical game and they're physically and mentally exhausted, we're trying to hit them with a couple of things and get them going so we can play.
It's funny you say that because we talk about this on staff a lot, but it's kind of like the old Lincoln quote. I didn't have time to write a short note, so I wrote a long one. Talk a little bit about just the role as an assistant and maybe even like the different coaches that you've worked under and the philosophies that they have in terms of, numbers or information and sort of how you've had to act as a filter for some of that.
Well, certainly each coach has a different philosophy when it comes to scouting. And as an assistant coach, we have to adjust to that. Now, regardless of the amount of information that a head coach wants me to present to him or her, I want to make sure I have all the information available. Just speaking for the great coach I work for now, Kim Malky, she doesn't want to be bogged down with a lot of numbers, but she expects me to know them. So we've gotten to a point really quick because I think we do have a shared philosophy of what's valuable to her and what really is something that I need to hang on to. What I want to be able to do is in practice, Kim might be working on an offensive set and she may turn to me and say, now, how are they going to defend that? Where she doesn't want me to give them how they're going to defend every single thing we do in a written report or when we meet. But she does expect me to know when she asks same things on a bench. She may turn around and say, what are these guys going to do next? What do you think? What do you think they're thinking? So that's where I need to have all the information. For better or worse, I'm Google, and whenever she needs to hit the search engine, she wants answers, but not until then. Less is more for her. She wants her. A head coach has so many things going through their head, both in practice and games. And I think that's what makes Kim really, really good. She has amazing instincts. And we don't want to bog those instincts by giving her a whole bunch of analytics or a whole bunch of suggestions. There's some main things that are important in the way that we play. And those are the things she wants to know about. We do a lot of ball screen actions and we're big into feeding the post. She wants to know how are they going to defend the ball screen? How are they going to defend the post? Those are big. Those are big for her. And to be honest with you, the majority of head coaches I've worked for are very similar to that. Very similar to that. I have worked for some that may want a little bit more information, but for the most part, less is better for them. I think the number one word for an assistant coach that's responsible for scouting with their head coach's trust. When you can develop a relationship based on trust, and you do that by giving correct answers. Like I told you, there'll be times where Kim will look at me on the bench, and there may be a blob situation. Say, what are they going to do here? And I can say, Coach, I think what they're going to do is blah blah blah. There is an occasion where I say, Coach, I don't know, because I don't have the information. Maybe the work I did in the film room didn't give me something to stick, and I'm not going to guess. I do not want to guess. I want to say, this is what I think. And that happens in a lot of areas. Sometimes it happens at staff meetings. She says, Bob, have you seen him play any zone? And I say very little. Well, so what do you think? And I'll have to say, well, this is just a guess. But I think that word trust is really important when you're passing along information to your head coach.
That makes sense. So let's get into Iowa here a little bit, and let's just start with kind of what is their identity? What did you think about them going into the game? And what were you thinking in terms of some of the plans that you had? Maybe we'll start with them offensively, and then we can roll into kind of what you guys did offensively as well.
Well, the thing about Iowa, when you look at them offensively, they were unlike any team we had played. And of course, the primary reason for that was Caitlin Clark. In all my years, men or women, I've never seen a player that could do the things that she could do at the level she could. Just a tremendous three shooter with unimaginable range, a quick release, could get to the paint, penetrate. By the way, led the nation in assists. So one of the things when we like to look at teams and we talk about the analytics is I like to look at their stat package in games they win and their stat package in games they lose. We want to see what's important for them to win and what do we need to concentrate on taking away. And certainly we do that with key players. And so the thing that we noticed with Caitlin Clark is she averaged like 27 points when they win, and then she averaged 30 when they lose. And I remember I was giving Kim those numbers. She said, "What are you telling me?" I said, "Caitlin Clark's going to score, Coach." She we got to make sure she doesn't go off. But if our game plan is to shut her down, that's not going to happen. So we had to delve in a little bit deeper offensively. We saw that when they win, they get the ball into the paint. They're very, very, very big and into paint touches, whether it's Caitlin Clark penetrating, whether it's their perimeter players box cutting. Sonano was just an outstanding post player. He got a lot of post feeds. But there was a huge differential in games they won with the paint in terms of it's like a 10-point differential in terms of when they lost. So, and we're big believers already in defending in such a way to take away the paint. And I do believe that. I think when you're scouting, you don't want to veer away from your philosophy. So, Don Meyer would always say it's not what you teach, it's what you emphasize. So when we were looking at Iowa in terms of defending them, a couple of things. We wanted to keep Clark in front of us. That was we just didn't want her to get to the paint. We didn't want her to get the mid-range jump shot. If she makes some threes, we're going to live with that. I also believe this. We talked about this a minute ago. You can't take away everything. You certainly can't take away everything with Caitlin Clark. She's just a generational player. But we wanted to take the paint away from her, keep her in front of us. And then we wanted to make sure that we did a good job of defending Sonano because we thought that was a really important part. In games they won, Sonano averaged 19. In games they lost, she only averaged 11. So the difficult thing with Iowa was finding out if you want to double in the post, who are you going to double off of? Because they can all shoot the three. We did select a player that we wanted to double off, and then we also used our spacing principles. When the spacing broke down, the closest player would double, even if that meant they might get a kick-out three. And we really emphasized early that we were going to do that. We thought those were the two primary players. So the first couple of possessions, they ran ball screens for Clark. We trapped. And we only wanted to do it for a couple possessions. And it wasn't necessarily well executed. We just wanted to plant a seed. And then the first time the ball wanted to get into the low post of Sonano, we wanted to double her. The thing we wanted to do defensively is not let Iowa go off. We with a short turnaround, there just wasn't a lot we could do. We just didn't. We knew it was going to be a high possession game. We know it was going to be a high scoring game. And that's why probably 70% of our scout dealt with what we wanted to do offensively, because we knew we were going to have to outscore them. In terms of defending people, one of the things that I think that some coaches don't maybe give enough concentration level to is making that player guard you on the other end. So we wanted to make Clark guard us, and we wanted to make Sonano guard us. The thing about Sonano is we knew that she could foul out. She'd fouled out about 5 or 6 games that year. Now, what we had to be careful of is they also double the post, but they had 2 players that were a little slow getting there, one that was very slow getting there. So one of the things that we talked about as our staff were the 3 or 4 sets where the doubler was as far away from the low post as we could get. And that's why a player like LaDasia Williams was able to have a big game for us. I mean, LaDasia was a kid who averaged, around 10 points a game for us, and she got 20 this game. We were plus 18 when LaDasia was in the game, plus 18, and that's because we were able to establish her in the post and get some points in the paint. That was the other part of the paint equation. And there's like a 10-point differential in wins and losses based on Iowa's defense of keeping the ball out of the paint. So we thought if we could take the paint away from them and we can get the ball in the paint, we would have a great chance for success. And the other thing was by able to get the ball into Williams, we were able to get Sonano in foul trouble. And the other part of looking at it is we thought we had a more productive bench. If it got to be a ball game, their bench versus our bench, we thought that was an advantage. And that's kind of what happened, with about 5 or 6 minutes to go in the first half, we're up by about 6, and we lose Angel Reese, our best player, and Lex Morris, our second best player. Well, not soon after, Sonano and Clark are on the bench, and we're able to expand the lead to 17 because our bench, I think, was just a little bit stronger than Iowa's. So those were some of the thought processes that we looked at. Nothing earth-shattering. Again, you want to keep it short and sweet, but take away the paint from them, and then you got to decide how you're going to do that. You got to, you just can't say we're going to take away the paint. Clark, if you're going to take away from the paint, so we're a little bit more in gaps than we normally are. And we know we're probably going to give up probably a few more threes, but you got to have an order priority when you defend. And then our sets that we wanted to run, we thought we could get a few more threes against them because we thought that they would pack it in a little bit and try and pressure Reese in there. So those are kind of the thought processes we had as we were dealing with Iowa.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think one of the really interesting things that you talked about was, pushing them away from the paint. And I think it was incredible. Iowa was an elite team. Like they were the number 1 in the country in offense. And I mean, Dee, if we could go back to slide 4 real quick, just for a half second. I think if you looked at their just looked at the numbers, I mean, they hit their average on the year or better. In an incredible way. Dee, I think, yeah, there you go. In an incredible way. I mean, 1.14 points per possession is pretty solid. I think every coach in the country would probably take that if they could. But one of the things that I noticed is by forcing them to take more threes, that created a pretty big opportunity for long rebounds and getting out in transition, which kind of opened the floor up for you guys to get out and run. And I guess just maybe talk about that in terms of, your guys' strategy going in. Did you know that you had that big of an advantage in the rebounding game, or was that something that just kind of happened, as part of the game flow?
Well, we're a really good rebounding team. We've been, I think maybe we got out rebounded once this past year, but I think, we'll get maybe sidetracked a little bit from scouting, excuse me, and just talk a little bit about philosophy, because I think it's really important. I think every outstanding team that I've coached or coached against, there's 2 things that are important to them. One is taking care of the basketball, and one is rebounding. Now, why is that important? That sounds like, sure, coach, that's good. Well, why is it? Because we're talking possessions. If you're taking better care of the ball than your opponent, then you're going to get more shot attempts. If you're rebounding better than your opponent, you're going to get more shot attempts. Here's an underrated statistic versus Iowa. We took 70 field goal shots. Iowa took 56. We took 14 more shots than Iowa. And that's because our turnovers were fewer and we were stronger on the boards. Now, that's a philosophical thing that we do. That's a big stat. If you just want to arbitrarily pull up box scores, you'll be shocked at, because we always look at field goal percentage and the 3-point field goal percent and this and that, but just look at shot attempts. I would probably venture to say 90% of teams that get more shots win games, and that sounds pretty easy, but not a lot of people give thought to it and their philosophy. And then that digs in also to how you defend and how you run your offense. So we thought going in the ball game, if we played our game and we did not allow Iowa to get into their game, we felt really good about our chances. And the fact that we had 14 more shots than Iowa, that was just a really positive part of what we wanted to achieve.
Bob, do you think that part of this, just going back to, keeping it simple, do you think part of this fits into the narrative of the scouting responsibility and that you just can't do everything? How much of this do you focus on as a filter for the athletes and getting them bought into the philosophy that you have?
Well, the word trust comes back into play. I think one of the mistakes that young assistant coaches do is they try and impress their players and their staff that all the information they gathered. So they're putting together these long scouting reports to show, this is what and I think what players want, if you can give them one or two pieces as a team and maybe give them one thing individually on their matchup, they're going to trust you. They're going to respect you. So again, we'll say it more before we leave. Less is more. What you have to be able to do when you give less, though, is prioritize the less. What is absolutely the most important thing we have to do defensively? What is absolutely the most important thing we have to do on the other end of the floor? And then your staff has to simplify the game plan to make sure that we're trying to achieve those goals. And then each player's different. I have some players on our team that watch an amazing amount of film, and then we have others that just watch the bare minimum. So you have to understand sometimes how players receive that information, and then make sure you're getting it to them in the right channels. One of my jobs are finding out how players best receive information. I have a player that after we go over a film session and maybe even a practice, I'll keep them after to walk through some things, because physically that's how they receive the information best. I've got some that have to write it down and just talk through it, and then we have others that are really good visually with whether it's film or going through practice. I think Kim is excellent so we're playing a team that does a good job trapping ball screens. So we're going to do some breakdown on that. And then we'll go to the whole method, and there'll be some carryover. She's really good at whatever that one or two things are to break it down in a part method form that day in practice before we go over the whole method. She's also excellent at not going over everything. I've said this before, it's been 20 years ago, but I was at an AAU event sitting with Gino Oriem at UConn, and we were talking about scouting. He said he'd really gotten away from wanting to know all the sets and all the plays. He was more into concepts. Like, are they a ball screen team? Are they a post feed team? Are they a dribble drive team? And then he would go about setting his practice to defend the concepts, not all the various plays. And Kim's a lot like that. And I think there's a lot you can say to keeping your team focused on what we're trying to defend as opposed to what they're running. I mean, that's a big difference. We got to be us. How can we be us and attack them as opposed to worrying about all the different things that they're going to run?
Something you mentioned, Bob, that I think was pretty powerful, and it goes back to being us, was you mentioned every player for LSU knows what the team's identity is. How important is that for your players to know that going into a game like Iowa or any conference SEC game, knowing that you guys still want to be you?
I think it's probably one of the most underrated concepts that teams have. There's a phenomenal writer, Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Probably the most important book I've ever read. but he would talk about when he would go into companies and organizations to talk to them and to evaluate them. He liked to walk down the hall, and he would stick his head in offices and just have casual conversations. Then he would just casually ask them, what's the mission of this organization? And he said he would always be surprised at how he would get different answers at different offices. And he always knew right then that this is the problem. They don't have a central understanding of what it is that they're trying to do and how to do it. Now, Kim does that a lot verbally by talking about what's important to us, the structure of our practice. I mean, we're a very big post-play team. So we practiced, I think, 101 times this year. 101 times we started practice with a post-feed drill. Now, that post-feed drill, there'd be variables, maybe no defense today, defense today. Today, the defense is going to front. Tomorrow, they're going to play behind. We may add a double, but every day was the post feed. So we're working on posting and sealing, how to deliver the pass, so every day you're doing a handful of things that register with your kids that this is really important to coach. This is what we're about. So I just, the best teams I've been involved with, the staff and the team had a great understanding of this is how we want to play the game. And again, there's a million ways to play the game, and all of them are effective if they're taught and executed properly. But does your team know what's important to you? I think that's huge.
It's so funny that you say that, because I think that, the championship game, what you guys did offensively really speaks to that core. You guys took care of the ball, you got the ball in the paint, and you out rebounded. And I just think that that's, such an incredible story that you're able to tell and lean on, and it creates a culture that, is going to be super important as you guys continue to build what you are there. One of the questions from the audience that I think you want to touch on at some point, but I think it's a good spot to put it in, is in prep for the championship game, how many games in advance do you start breaking down? How many games do you watch as part of that process?
Well, it's certainly less in the championship. And I can tell you what happened with this deal, because, something funny actually happened on the plane ride. So before we left, and obviously we had a few more days extra to do Virginia Tech. So we broke down our Virginia Tech, had our scout. And before we left, I had started breaking down Iowa. The unique thing was the other possible opponent that we were going to play was South Carolina. And we had watched a couple of South Carolina games, but didn't need to watch as much because we played them in the SEC, played them fairly late in the year, play them every year. They know us, we know them. So we kind of had that one ready, but Iowa was a new team for us. So I'd watched a couple of games the night before we left, and then I'm actually on the plane on the way to Dallas, and I'm watching a Iowa game, and the president of our university leans over and he says, "You're watching Iowa instead of Virginia Tech." And my thing to him is, well, we put Virginia Tech to bed. I mean, we're ready to go. We got everything we need, but I need to be a little bit ahead because we only have that one day to knock things out, and not just one day, but so if we're fortunate enough to beat Virginia Tech, as I'm telling you, as soon as we walk off the floor, Kim's going to start asking me questions about the next game. So we have to be prepared. Iowa, I watched a total of 6 games, which is less. If I'm in the SEC, I want to watch at least 10 games. And we may be jumping ahead here, but I'm a full game watcher. I'm not a synergy clip guy. We use synergy for some things, but in terms of scouting, I got to watch the full game. That's how I get into the mind of the other staff, what they're trying to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it. And it's a pretty long process. I mean, I'm just not watching the game. I'm backwards, forwards, trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do at this particular time. And when I'm pulling those 10 games up, I obviously like to get the last 3, 4, 5 games to see how they are playing at this particular time. But I need to pull up a couple of losses. I want to see what happened in those losses, or games where they played incredibly well. What happened there? And if it's possible, a game or two against teams that played like us. And I need all of that. I need all of that. I mean, the way I do it, it takes time. They'll tell you I'm in the office around 6 or 6:30, and I'm watching film, and I'm here long after everybody leaves. Once the season starts, this is my job. This is what I'm doing. Trevor Morard. It takes what it takes. So 6 games for Iowa, which is fewer than I would normally like to watch, but that's normal postseason because it's short turnaround.
That makes sense. Go ahead, D.
I was just going to say, I think many people, depending on their background, they hear 6, and that's quite a bit. And I think what it leans into, Bob, is there's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit, which is advanced scouting. But many people don't understand or know on the elite level what advanced scouting is. So you talked about all this information you gather, you watch 6 to 8 to 10 games on an opponent. What are some of the elements that the advanced scouting is, the items that you're taking a look at?
Well, for me, I want to be worth a few points. Like I'm hoping that the information I can give Kim and our team before we get to the game could be worth 6 or 8 points. And then when I'm on the bench, hopefully I could be worth a couple more 2 or 4 points with the information I get. If I can help us with that type of swing. Now, to do that, it takes great detail. It's it's not enough for me to go into Kim and say, hey, team A is going to play us a 2-3 zone. I've got to say, this is why I think they're playing zone. I think they're going to try and take this particular action away from us. This is where they're weak defender. This is where they're going to hide them. Bob Knight would say, when you play man, you get to pick the matchups. When you play zone, the other team gets to pick the matchup. So I take great pride in going in and telling Kim, they're going to play 2-3. They're hiding their worst defender over here on this side. We can run this action. If we look to reverse the ball, we can tack them off the closeout, or this is the best opportunity for us to feed the post from right here. So team A is a 2-2-1 3/4 court press team. It's not enough for me to go to Kim and say, hey, they 2-2-1 press. I want to tell her, hey, it's a mouse trap. They're going to trap it at half court. If we reverse the ball, this defender over here at the guard spot is not going to be good enough to take the dribble away. This is where if we take the ball from this point to this point, we can punch it across. And then, what they flow into out of the press? Don't say 2-2-1. They're going to fall back man to man. And number 32 is always the slowest at picking her man up. So when we get the ball across half court, let's make sure we know where 32 is. A few years back when we were in the regional championship playing against North Carolina was an excellent press team, but they had a hole in their press when the ball was reversed that you could throw the ball to, and that person had vision. So we took our best 3-point shooter, Kiana Chaney, who's usually up with the guards on the press, and we took her all the way and put her at the other end of the corner. And we were able to make a pass from A to B, throw the ball over the top, and then hit Kiana in the corner where the only person out there to guard her was a big. And she hit 2 threes and then broke the big down on the closeout, and North Carolina got out of the press. It's the details that make the difference. It's the details. And that's why it can be time consuming. You're trying to get an advantage. It's not just information. Here's what they do, but when do they do it? Where do they do it? How do they do it? When this player comes in, this is the offensive set they like to use. Those kind of things. Coming out of a timeout, they like to trap out of the 2-3. They like to trap out of the 2-3. This side is where the trap is the weakest. So coming out of a 2-3, if we run this action, we have a chance to break the trap and get a shot. Those are the type of things that I think scouting can do and give yourself and your team an advantage. And again, it's time consuming. The worst thing that can happen is you watch a game and you think you got a scout. You just, So on this particular play, this player didn't defend very well. You've got to watch a lot of games before you know whether or not that's actually true or not. And a lot of young coaches will watch a game or two, or they'll watch synergy clips, or they'll watch a game that was played on ESPN and they think they got a scout. If you really want an advantage, you've got to take the time and pour in and just observe as much as you can. And take notes, and then go back and review and try and put some concise things together. Not a lot, but a couple that you think are worth a few points for your team.
Bob, with that, I think one of the really interesting things that we talked about in the prep for this is just, the involvement that you have in scouting year round. It's a year round process for you. It's not something that just happens in season. Can you dig into, the scouting that you do in the summer? Because I thought it was so unique, and I think it would be something the audience would really enjoy.
Well, I like to go back and take our league games and break our game down. So, say it's Alabama, go back and break that game down. I have some charts that I run through it. I want to look at Alabama sets again. I'll have my scout from the Alabama game out to see if I missed something or I was incorrect or something like that. And I'll go through all our SEC games and put it in a file. So next year when we play them, I can pull it out and say, yeah, I remember this happened last year. Let's make sure we look for it this year. So just kind of gives me a little head start. And, the thing is that is a blessing for me is I love to watch film. I love to watch film.
So I want to talk about that real quick, because you mentioned it a couple times, watching clips versus watching, a full game. What specifically are some of the advantages that you feel like you can grasp out of, seeing a full game or seeing multiple games versus, say a last, 400 clips from a team?
Well, you get flow. To me, that's a big part of the game is flow. How do teams play? What's a coach going to call if they came down the floor 2 or 3 straight times that haven't scored? Coaches have go-to plays when their offense is struggling. Well, if I just pull up a clip, I don't know what happened before that. There's so many things that go in. One of the things I got, Kevin Eastman told me this many years ago, that a big thing in the NBA is they scout substitution patterns. A lot of coaches have tendencies when they sub, like maybe they take their best player out. They got a point guard they take out with a minute and a half to go in the quarter. And so that becomes an extended break with between quarters. Well, maybe that's the time we jump into a press, that for that minute and a half, that point guard's out. So you don't get those in clips. If you really want to get into the mind of your opponent, you have to watch the entire game to see everything that evolves and how it leads to one thing or another. I keep stuff like, we're in the women's side. So what are teams running when they advance the ball with a minute to go? What are those actions? What's an opponent's catch-up game like? Are they pressing? Are they doubling? When does that start? Are they a team that fouls, with the 3-point differential late in the game? Are they going to defend or are they going to foul? That makes a difference in what play we call there, knowing what's going to happen. If they're going to foul, we got to get the ball, obviously, to our best free throw shooter. If not, we have a few more options to try and run a play and get a good shot. But all those things, I think you need to know: score, time, flow, all those things. And I just think you get that better when you're watching an entire game.
For those that watching those many games or watching full games is different, Bob, you mentioned you use tools to help guide what you're watching on film, and some of that is used with your stats and analytics. Can you talk about what you look at, maybe even before you watch that first game or after you watch that first game, for those stats and analytics to help guide you?
Sure. The first thing I do for a scout is pull up a roster, pull up a stat sheet, and then pull up analytics before I ever watch a game. And I think analytics are incredibly huge. I don't think you use analytics for scouting strategy. I do think analytics for me is a GPS. So when I see a team is scoring 38% of their points in the paint, I don't come back and say, hey, coach, we got to take away the paint points. I've got to go to that film and see how are they getting the ball to the paint and having so much success. So that's what I really like about the analytics. Or if somebody's doing something against them, where's the weakness? That's what I think analytics do for you. I mentioned Synergy. We do go to Synergy. I like to pull up Synergy and see what percentage of points does a team get off a ball screen or off a down screen. You can get a lot of things off synergy. To me, and I'll selfless plug here for Just Play. The analytics package with Just Play is just freaking phenomenal. I can pull up an individual player. I can pull up a lineup. These 5 players, how are they scoring? There's just a variety of things that we have here with Just Play analytically. And don't get married to the same analytics. One set of analytics for one team will be more important than for, say, the next team. And that's what you have to figure out.
I think analytics is a term, it's more attractive now in the last few years, Bob. Like you said, you've used it almost your entire career. And there might be a misnomer out there a bit. I think Kim was caught in a press conference talking about numbers. She was messing with you in some way about analytics. What do you say to people that, well, first I'll let you talk about Kim's opinion on analytics for the crowd, and then maybe how to gauge someone that doesn't take that. So working under Kim, how do you guys use analytics, and is she open to that?
Well, she is very open to the results. And I don't refer to them as analytics when I give them to Kim. I think some people out there, they think analytics, or they think computers are spitting these numbers out, and there's no substance to them. And certainly I've been around people who are just far too consumed with the numbers as opposed to letting the numbers guide them. So again, Kim's somebody who doesn't want a lot of stuff. So I'm not giving her all these numbers. If I give her, say, for instance, we're playing somebody that has 38% of their scoring comes from the 3-point line, I'm going to immediately follow that up with who's getting those shots and how they're getting it. And that's what she wants. But that number makes a difference to her. And she actually uses those numbers as much as I do. When she'll stop practice and say, hey, guys, these guys are getting 42% of their points in the paint when they win. And so the analytic part of it is important, but not by itself. It's like it's on the menu. You see it on the menu, but it's not till the plate comes with all the food that everything gets good. So she is, we have no problems. She just doesn't like the word analytics, but she absolutely loves how it gets us to where we need to go. And like I said, I call them stats. Here's a great stat right here, Coach.
It's funny how one word can change someone's viewpoint. But we talk about the funnel in advanced scouting and the wealth of information you are taking in with all the games you're watching, all the stats, and being able to create a game plan. What information do you hand over to the staff so that they're ready, including Coach Malky, of the packet of, hey, this is what I think, this is my game plan? What all information does that entail?
Well, one of the things that's really important, I think, is that you have a plan A and a plan B. So if we're playing a team that's heavy on ball screens, I want to tell them, this, I want to give them the numbers, 52% of their man-to-man offensive actions deal with ball screens. But then I'm going to say, these are the 2 players that are most effective at it, and this is what I think we have to do to defend it. If that doesn't work, so maybe we're hard hedging. If that doesn't work, then what's my plan B? So there's going to be about 3 or 4 things offensively with that. And there's going to be about 3 or 4 things defensively with that. The better teams, there's always going to be something else. It may be, hey, these guys are really good in the blobs. We need to make sure we're spending a little bit of extra time so we can cover how we want to defend 2 or 3 of their main blobs. So it's almost a snowflake kind of thing. No game is like the other. But I do think it's important to give them an analytic of why this is important, then give them a plan A and a plan B, and then from there we structure practice around it.
What's interesting about the funnel that we're looking at is even though the information wanes, each step is probably just as important as the one before. Your personal preparation is just as important as what you get to the staff and what you get to the players. What is the player preparation side for you look like when you're giving a game plan to your players? And you spoke about it a little bit with, you got to meet them where you are, but what kind of hold does that take in the scouting process of importance?
Well, again, I think less is more. We don't want to, bog them down with all kinds of numbers and information. It's probably one of the biggest evolvements that I've been a part of as a scout. Early on, 15 years ago, a scouting report may have been 10 or 15 pages, and there'd be paragraphs and numbers and all this stuff. And now we've certainly dialed that down. I'll give everybody a name here. If you've never heard of this gentleman, you need to pull him up and study him. His name's Tim Elmore. He's a renowned educator, and his specialty is on today's generation and how to best communicate with them. So like our scouting reports now will have 2 pages on individual scouts. So the font size is a little bigger. We use color. We use bold on certain things and bullet points. So we'll give you, say, for instance, you're guarding somebody. We'll give you 2 or 3 things that they do well, and they'll be prioritized. And then we'll give you 2 or 3 things that we want you to focus on when you're defending them. So we'll do that with the individual report. And then there'll be 1 page that'll have a synopsis of offense, defense, special situations, and those will be bullet points. And then the last page will have 4 or 5 game goals. We have a cover sheet, old football idea here. A cover sheet looks nice, but it'll have a motivational quote or something that we're going to do to frame the game. Just a thought or a concept that we may carry over, with some of our motivational stuff that we do. And we'll give them that scouting report. Let's say we play Thursday and we play again on Sunday. So Friday we come in and I present the scout. And when I present the scout, we generally start with their offense, and we'll watch some offensive video clips. Again, those clips probably aren't going to be more than 8 or 10 minutes long at the most. Their attention spans are shorter. Now, what we do demand is that they're taking written notes. We're really big into note taking. We think that gives them a resource to go back to, and we think it helps them with the retention. Part of that will be asking them to read from the reports themselves. So Alexis Morse is our point guard. We'll have her read the opponent's point guard stuff instead of me. And then that particular day at practice, a part of our practice will be towards defending the way they play. So then the Saturday we come back and we'll do the same thing with the defensive part. And then on game day is generally when we work on, special situations, blobs, slobs, jump balls, those specific things. But we do some different things in terms of how we present. I'll refer to Tim Elmore again. Tim tells this great story about in the beginning of time, man would reach down in a river and pull up water and drink from it. And then he figured out how to carve out a piece of wood that he could scoop the water up. And then he figured out how to, drop a bucket in a well. And then we figured out plumbing, and now we got bottled water. And his point is water over the history of man has never changed. How we package it has. So while we're trying to get our team to the same place through scouting as we did 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago, how we package it needs to change. And again, you've got to find how those kids best receive that information. You're going to do everything with everybody, but you need to find extra time for players who may need to receive that a little bit differently.
No, Bob, I think
that.
that's.
I was just going to say, I love that analogy, Austin. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's at the core of what we want to do at Just Play. And I think that, why we work so well, with you all and many of our other customers is that we want to try to give you a solution that allows you to do that, because your roster may change. The needs of your players may change. The way that you do things may change. And continuing to be on the forefront of that is super important. And thinking about how you can package different information and get it in the hands of your athletes, for all of the different ways that they may learn is really important, not just now, but for, where the game is going, and how player learning is rapidly changing in kind of this social media driven world that we're in. Dee, sorry to cut you off there, but just
No, you're good.
at the core why of what we do, I think is so much aligned in that.
Yeah, I
If
just
I could
think
add
it's
something.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Bob.
Let me just add something because you mentioned social media, which obviously makes me think of the cell phone. This is becoming a very big piece of our scouting philosophy. So we might be getting ready to practice today to get ready for a team that we got to double the low post, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, I may shoot a clip of another team doubling that low post and just shoot it to our kids. It may be a 20-second clip. It may be a quote or a thought about an emphasis today. Win the paint, win the game. So again, when we go back to talking about this generation and how to give them information, it may be a stat like when we out rebound opponents, we win 95% of our games. Let's hit the boards. So we do a lot of that because kids live on those phones. Now we don't give them long stuff, but you're constantly trying to get thoughts into their minds about where they need to be, and I just want to make sure I slip that in.
Definitely, and I think about the last 5 years of how much what you guys do have changed, and even more how much the kids have. I think there's a lot of people on this call trying to figure out how to teach their players, reach them, get a game plan. Bob, you're unique because you've been around it 30 years, but your process keeps changing. What would you say to the coaches here that there's something in their process that they might want to change, but they're afraid to because of comfort?
Yeah, that's an absolutely great question. I think, I just got through doing a clinic out in Charlotte, and the associate head coach of the men's staff at Missouri, a good friend of mine, C.Y. Young, said the biggest word in coaching today is evolve. And it really is true. So many parts of the game is changing from, gosh, we can go into the portal, we talk about roster management, technology. If you're not embracing technology, old school Bill Parcells had this great quote. If you're using a yellow legal pad and the opponent's using laptops, you're going to get passed by. And I just really think that you have to be open-minded. That doesn't mean you just change and drop everything that you do. But you have to be open-minded to looking at new ways. Things that make a difference to me in technology are things that help me time-wise. That's why I love Just Play. Like I named you all these analytics that we look at: paint points, points off turnovers, what so-and-so, all this stuff. Now, before Just Play, I'm printing out box scores. Like if we're playing Iowa, I'm printing out like 36 box scores, and I'm adding all these different things up so I can get to the numbers. This is why the technology of Just Play shoots, it's already done. What that means is I can watch more film, or I can spend more time with the player. So I think you always have to be looking at a way to improve, not change. Not change for sake of change is not the answer, but if you can improve upon something. And while I'm thinking about it, one of the most important things you can do as a coach that I often think gets overlooked is to teach your kids how to watch film. One of the things we've done in some of my programs is have our players scout a WNBA team in the summer and have to write a report. And then have conversations with them about what they saw. There's nothing that excites me more than Angel Reese is a really, really bright kid. For me to run into her in the morning, say, "Hey, did you watch so and so last night?" And you say, "Yeah, coach. Did you notice they were doing this, this, and this?" That's huge. But kids aren't going to know that if you don't sit down and talk to them about it. Teach your kids how to watch film, then they'll appreciate scout video even that more, and they may even pick up some things that you don't. I'm a big believer in that. That's happened to me a couple of times in my career, where when I was at Texas A&M and we were, and I was responsible for our defense, we had this amazing point guard, George Jones, who just one of the smartest kids I'd ever coached. And during the game, I would ask her, how do you want to guard these ball screens? Because of trust. I know that she watched the film. She was out there. We had a game against DePaul, and it came down to a sideline out of bounds play where they had the ball, and we did a thing called up or down. If we were up, we're up on the ball, and we're choking off everything ball side. If we were down, we were off the ball, still choking, but looking for somebody to break free. And I wanted to go down. And our best defensive player, Jasmine Lumpkin, had a dejected look on her face. Said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Coach, I've watched this kid. If you put me on the ball, I can get a deflection." And I trusted her. You can't do this unless you trust your team. And I put her on that ball. That's what she did. She deflected and got a steal. So I think getting your players involved in the scout, letting them watch, having them understand what they need to look for. I think that can really be a big separator.
And that goes into something I've heard you say before, Bob, which is you shouldn't wait for them to ask why.
Exactly.
Nowadays. And it speaks, even everybody can hear it as you speak, how important that is for you and your game prep to teach your players and them understand the why behind it, whether it's film or stats or what have you. So I think that's another big key for something you've talked about so far. I know we're getting close here, a little over the hour. I just have two things, and I'm going to let Bob close this out. One, if you guys have any questions, that if you got 2 minutes with Coach Bob Starkey and you could ask him anything on Scout, go ahead and drop that in Q&A. We'll get to those. We have a number of them already. If there's something we didn't answer, didn't get to, go ahead and drop that in. Don't be shy. Bob, you have hundreds of people listening to you, and the passion to grow this game and impact and influence them in their careers is obviously right in front of you. What advice do you have for your listeners, or if there's something you want them to take away, what would you like to end on?
Well, I think what's important in growing the game, I'll use a Don Meyer quote. Our example is not the main thing; it's the only thing. And, we want our kids to work hard. They need to see us working hard. And I think scouting is a great way to invest in kids. I love watching film with kids. It's a great way for us to have conversations away from basketball. And I think if we really want to get into some depth here, we could talk about it. But relationships is more important than anything else. Our kids are going to absorb information, whether it's scouting or whether it's coaching or teaching, when they know that we care about them generally. I can't tell you how many times I've had a kid come in here and we've watched a little film, and then I cut the film off and we have some conversations on some other things. So I do think there's a lot of positives that you get from scouting and watching film. And again, it takes what it takes, depending on how good you want to do your job is based on how hard you want to work and how deep you want to get into it. I also, as an assistant coach, always remember it comes down to your head coach's philosophy, not yours. It's your job to adjust and adapt and get him or her the information that they need. And then the second thing, I encourage you, first of all, it's amazing we got 1,000 people on here today. That makes me feel so good, because there's 1,000 people on a summer afternoon that have invested on trying to improve part of their game. I mean, that's phenomenal to me. That's exciting. But don't stop here. There's so many other people out there that you can make a phone call to or go visit and find out how they scout or do other things. There's so much free information out there for coaches. I'm an old guy. So when I came up, you had to pay to go to a clinic, or you had to buy a book, or you had to buy a VHS. And here's Just Play sponsoring something like this. And there's so many other avenues out there where we can learn the game. Just take advantage of all of them.